Mr. Uppal, always a pleasure speaking with you, sir. Do you think India needs higher safeguard duties from cheap imports? I mean, China and Russia are posing a huge threat to the Indian steel makers right now.
Most definitely. I think that the Indian steel industry is not on a level playing field with China. You take every dimension of steel industry, the Chinese have a distinct advantage. They have big financial support from the government to the tune of 13 to 15%. Their electricity tariffs, their freight costs, and also things like, if you take interest costs, all these things put together give Chinese a huge advantage. And it is ironical that it takes you $10 to bring the steel from Shanghai to Bombay, but it takes you from Odisha something like $55 to bring a ton of steel from Odisha to Bombay. So you can see what is the kind of competition we have to face. So I think the Indian industry is very competitive. If it's a level playing field. If you look at the conversion costs in India, I think they are on par with any of the producers, whether it's Koreans, Japanese, or Chinese. We can match up to any one of them. So I think there's a very strong case for us to have a proper safeguard duty against this reckless dumping which is being done by some of these countries. Let me just inform you that the prices at which these countries are selling in the domestic market is much higher than the prices at which the products are being offered in the Indian market. So there's a clear case for us to have some kind of safeguard or anti-dumping duty to protect our domestic industry.
Ravi, can you give me a sense of how much Indian steel industry is losing because of cheap Chinese dumping? Can you give me a number, maybe in billions of dollars or rupees crore?
Well, I may not be able to give you a dollar figure for that. Let me give you the magnitude of the problem. The last year the Indian demand grew just by about 3%, and the imports more than doubled last year. That we imported something like 10 billion ton, and whereas the demand had grown only by about 2.5 million tons. So this means that the net market which was available to domestic producer actually shrunk by 7.5 million tons, and so therefore the domestic producer came under tremendous pressure, and the prices crashed by 15 to 20%. So that's not the kind of margin the steel industry ever made. So it forced most of the producers to go into the red. But that's number one. And if you look at the secondary producers, many of them had to pull down their shutters because they simply couldn't compete. See, today the primary producer of steel are selling at the same prices or even less than the secondary producer used to do. So where is the room for the secondary producers? I think on the whole, the Indian steel industry is in a huge distress, and I think that I'm sure that the government is very seized with the matter, and they will take all the steps which are required to protect the Indian steel industry.
So the other question is, Mr. Uppal, good morning, this is Niraj here, is the fact that the demand, I reckon, is also not that strong, because the reports that we've gotten for the month of June clearly point towards a very low offtake. So that is probably not helping matters either.
Well, that I agree that the steel industry demand deserves to grow much more. If the Indian economy is growing at 6 to 8%, I would reckon that the steel demand should really grow at 8 to 10%, 2 to 3% more than the GDP growth rate. That hasn't happened, but I'm certain that kind of demand will certainly come along post-monsoon season, because government is putting a lot of focus on the growth of infrastructure, road, sports, and everything, and nothing can be built without steel, because steel, Pandit Nehru used to call it as the fourth column of the national economy. So so it still remains very relevant sector. So I think demand will come, but the question is, who should be the beneficiary of the demand? Should it be the Indian industry, or should India become an extended domestic market of China? I think that's the question that we have to really address. And I also want to point out that right now India's total capacity is about 114 million tons, which is the third largest in the world, and we certainly can come to slot number 2, provided that we get the requisite support. And I don't see any reason why we should not encourage the Indian steel industry. If you look at United States or China, they have strictly followed the policy of buy China and buy US. And therefore, I don't think that we should be bashful about it, giving the kind of protection to our industry, which certainly can become the world's second largest industry.
Okay, just take a moment to just show you the price of UBL, United Breweries. I think that's shot up 10% now. So just a stock update out there, a couple of news flows around it. But UBL as a stock is up 10%. So just keep that in mind. That's the stock price for you. But Mr. Uppal, continuing with that discussion, you mentioned about how the steel demand should be better for the industry at large. For JSPL in particular, how have volumes shaped up in Q1? Have they been tepid, as would the case probably be for the other players as well?
Well, the first quarter in terms of volume for JSPL has been quite good. Our total production and the total sales and tonnage have increased by more than 35%. So it has been a good sort of quarter for us when it comes to production and sale figure. But the matter of concern, as I pointed out, what's the net price realization? I think there's room for improvement there. And as you know, last year we had completed the Angul plant and our Oman plant, and both of them are come on stream. And I think this year I expect our total volume of steel production and sale to grow by nearly 50% plus.
Uppal, we understand that JSPL has asked for 1,000 acres of land for Angul expansion as well. By when are you targeting to get the additional capacity on stream, and do you think demand in India can support the supply rush?
Well, for us, the Angul expansion, of course, is a necessity because, we will be setting up the additional capacity using a different route, which I think offers us more competitiveness in terms of the steel production. But what we have done at this moment is to put the expansion plans on the back burner because we first want to ensure that our existing capacity is fully utilized. So the Angul expansion will come, just as a matter of time. But as of now, we are fully sort of committed to utilize the capacity that we have created recently.
My follow-up question is that in order to expand, you also need coal. And we know the story there. Without getting into any darker explanation of what went right and what went wrong, are you planning to bid aggressively in the next round of coal auction?
Well, one thing is clear, that we need coal. If we don't have the mines, then obviously we have no sort of option but either to sort of buy them through e-auction in the domestic market, or we have to go for import. As of this moment, we are taking recourses to both these options. Some quantities are being imported, and the others we are trying to source in the domestic market. The answer to your question, whether we will participate in the forthcoming auctions, we have no choice. We have to look for sources of coal, and we will certainly participate in any option that exists which is viable, economically viable for us.
Now, Mr. Uppal, talking about coal, there could be a possibility of auctioning FSAs for non-regulated sector. Do you think this will be a big boost then to coal supply?
Well, I think it's a first step in the right direction, because in the previous auctions, that we had broad-banded all these sectors, cement, steel, captive power consumption into one category. So the steel sector is the one which suffered the most. I think steel needs coal. I think the government's decision to segregate the sectors and have a kind of a quota for each sector while going to auction, I think is a positive step, and let's hope that it will ensure that the steel sector is adequately provided for when it comes to a basic mineral like coal, which is required for steel production.
Final question. I know we've extended our appointment with you. The governor yesterday made an indication that the economic recovery has started. Gradually and slowly things are picking up. What is your understanding? Without giving us a politically right answer, give us the on-ground situation. Are things moving up? And if yes, what is the on-ground activity looking like?
Well, I think I'm not making any political statement. I'm a businessman, therefore I have to talk to you from the industry point of view. I do see that there are a lot of projects which are in takeoff stage. We already see, for example, in sectors like power, transmission, and no, I wouldn't say steel at this moment, and a lot of other infrastructure industry have started to move. I think post-monsoon in the quarter 3 and quarter 4, I definitely see that there's a possibility of steel demand going up by 5 to 6%. And so I'm positive, cautiously optimistic that things will turn around. My only concern remains, if the demand comes about, who is going to be beneficiary of it? Is it we, or is the importers into the country? And I think there's a strong case to make sure that the Indian industry which are long waited for the demand to come up, they should really become the beneficiary of any growth in demand that comes about due to the enhanced economic activity.
Mr. Uppal, such a pleasure speaking with you today. Thanks much for taking the time out and talking to us.
It's all mine.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.